Good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate your joining this Quantitax webinar. We've got a great guest speaker with insight into certainly very pertinent and is constantly evolving trade and tariff topics for importers. I received quite a bit of laudatory feedback and suggestions after Damon was. Damon, you were kind enough to speak at our one of our Slyman's CPE events in October. We lined it up while you were visiting some of your Cleveland Akron clients, and we appreciate you coming. And everybody was very happy with the presentations. And as far as the suggestions I'm referring to, I mean, basically it was the same. Why didn't you guys have Damon present for at least an hour? And so here we are. So here we are.
Perfect.
Yeah. So 50 minutes plus some questions time interspersed in there. But anyways, so before getting started and handing over to Damon, I just want to quickly thank our continuing sponsor, CCSI, powered by Corporate Technologies. They do bring the cloud to you. My good friend Joe Jasko, who's right here in Cleveland in Independence, and his team provide definitely a unique, powerful, secure solution. As we've experienced as subscribers of CCSI, their single cost per user solution eliminates the need for office computer hardware and servers and all that stuff with their virtual desktops that basically altogether eliminate the need for office CPUs. So, and their subscriptions include Microsoft 365, Windows, and associated support. And their IT offering, it really is one platform, one solution, one invoice, is cut down tremendously on effort and cost, and really can be used seamlessly whether or not you have a contracted or in-house IT professional. So they've been of use to a number of accounting firms, and probably more importantly to the clients of those firms that are just looking for a better, simpler solution for their IT needs, regardless of size. So thanks very much again to Joe and CCI for your continued support of our webinars and our Slyman's events. So just a quick bit of administrative information on CPE. So for those wanting to earn CPE for today's session, and those that may have questions on the material, we ask that you please have the chat function enabled, which you should find in your team's toolbar, and you can ask questions there. You can also ask questions anonymously if you'd like by sending them to info@quantitax.com, and that'll be monitored during the session, and any questions that come through we'll try to get through to Damon for answer either during the session or certainly afterwards. And then for CP purposes, we'll post 4 unique poll questions during the session. Registrants have to submit an answer to those questions. Hopefully there won't be any technical issues with answering the polls, but as a fail-safe, you can always just put your answer in through the chat if you like, and it'll be recorded that you responded there, and we'll make sure we get the CPE accordingly. Other fail-safe would be you could send it to info@quantitax.com. With that, all registrants, you will receive your program materials and certificates either Friday or by Monday at the latest if you answered the poll questions. And with that, I will introduce it to Mr. Damon, not Piatek, but Piatek.
Yes.
Mr. Damon Piatek. So just as I have to say, my name's pronounced a mitt, mitt with like a ball, a shoe, a glove, a mitt. I finally got Damon Piatek. I don't have a clever thing like that. You spell it out phonetically. I like it on your bio. But Damon's a licensed U.S. Customs broker. He has over 25 years of experience in international trade. He's coming to us today to provide this presentation very kindly. It's going to focus on key regulatory areas. I can say Piatek, but not regulatory areas affecting U.S. importers. He's going to start with customs and border protection valuation rules for customs entries. We're going to talk about the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, its role in the new tariffs. We're also going to have, Damon's also going to cover Section 232 tariffs, their legal foundation, their impact on sourcing and cost structures, and finally, some insights into the shifting landscape for importers, including some recent policy changes and enforcement trends, and just some practical strategies for maintaining compliance. So, Damon, thank you again very much, and please take it away.
You're welcome. Thanks for the great introduction. I don't think you missed anything, other than I'm a father of two and I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. So there we go.
Excellent.
If you have any questions about what I'm going through for everybody, please put them in the chat. I'll try to answer them as we're on topic. I really like the interaction, and we could gloss over something that you'd rather dive deeper into. I have this is stuff that I deal with every day, so I can take a side question on it. If you have something, please feel free. So I already got the introduction underway, so that's great. We appreciate that. Our big topic today is going to be customs valuation versus transfer pricing. This actually really came into play more so now than ever because of the initiation of the IEPA duties, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which was first created under uh, 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 not Kennedy, Carter. Jimmy Carter was the first one to actually use the economic powers, and he actually used them to sanction some foreign countries and foreign persons. So it's very important to know that these powers and these economic powers have been out there for a long time, but this is really kind of the first time it's been used to impose duty on products coming into the United States. So when that happens, all of these importers that are importing product into the United States, they're looking for ways to lessen the impact of the duties that they have to pay. Now, these duties are ranging anywhere from, 15%. At some time in the past year for China, it was up to 140% of the value of the product. So this can have a huge impact on a customer or an importer, I should say, that is in bringing product into the United States. So what is customs valuation and how is it different than transfer pricing? What I'm seeing in the industry is a lot of accountants are advising their clients that they could use transfer pricing for the value of the product on a multi-tiered transaction for customs purposes. Well, unfortunately, transfer pricing and customs valuation, they never meet. So what is the purpose of customs valuation? Well, customs valuation determines how much import duties or tariffs are owed, assessed the value of goods under customs regulations. Has nothing to do with the IRS, has nothing to do with taxes. It's strictly used for setting the price of products to assess the duty on it for U.S. Customs. So transfer pricing, this is the high level stuff, but transfer pricing sets the transaction price between related parties and entities and aims to match independent market rates as per tax authority standards. So when you talk about transfer pricing, it doesn't talk about customs. Those two never ever meet. And I think there's some confusion there in the industry, especially among importers, that, hey, I'm using transfer pricing for my taxes, but I have to use this other value. That why is it different? But they're two different roles and really two different regulatory agencies. So customs valuation and transfer pricing have separate regulatory roles serving international trade and taxation respectively. So we're going to drill a little bit more down into understanding customs valuation. So go ahead and you could put that first question up, multiple choice question up.
Great. We'll post that on the poll. Hopefully everyone can see that and respond to the poll and submit. Yep.
So there's 5 methods to value something for customs purposes. And the value that goes on the information that we take from the customer only is used for customs purposes. It's never shared with anybody else. It's not shared with tax entities, states, federal government, the IRS. It is only used with Customs and Border Protection and that information. Now, the idea of this, did that go back? Oh, that went back to, there we go. So The five methods are transaction value. Now, the transaction value of a good is the price paid or payable from the shipper to the importer or from the seller to the buyer. So whatever that transaction price is what we have to use for customs purposes. Now, the caveat to that is there's additional information that has to be put in to that to actually make it valid for U.S. Customs. So if there's something that is missing, then you have to add it in. And what I mean by that is there's some court cases out there for some big companies like OtterBox that were fined millions of dollars because they didn't price their product properly. So they make cell phone cases. I'm sure everybody's familiar with OtterBox, but they make a cell phone case that has a mold to it, an injection mold. Now they bought that mold from, let's say, China, and they sent the or they bought the mold, let's say, in Germany, and they sent it to China to have their goods manufactured. Well, the cost of that mold has to be included in the cost of the product when it's sent to the United States for customs purposes. So when they did that, they didn't include the cost of the mold, and it's what we call an assist. So we have to adjust the transaction price to include the cost of the mold. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. One is to do it per unit as it comes in. So they figure the mold is like $400,000. They're going to get 8 million units out of it. Take that, divide it into how many units there are, and then add that to the price as an assist. So there's all these different levels of items that we call assists that have to be added into that transaction value to get that transaction value. As I go through these valuations, what you're going to see is everything that we're looking at is bringing it back up to that transaction value. So really what they're looking at is that transaction value of the product from the seller to the buyer and what that actually is. And then there's all kinds of other things that we could look at, but transaction value is the number one value that we use in customs to process entries with the U.S. Customs. The next one we have is identical and similar values, and they're used in this order. The other thing is there's a hierarchy to this for customs valuation, and it has to be in that order. So if there's an actual sale, if there's a bona fide sale from a shipper to a consignee or a seller to a buyer, you can't use a deductive method. You can't use an identical method. So the hierarchy matters. So we did transaction identical value and similar value. So if the product isn't sold into the United States, but you've previously sold it into the United States, you have to use the value that you previously used for that new product. So if there is no buyer or seller, you're shipping it in for let's say a sampling test or a giveaway or something like that, and there's no value, there's no transaction. So you decided to give away 500 televisions to boost sales. Well, those actually have a value. And if you've sold those 500 televisions to somebody else before at a price, you have to use that same identical price of the identical product. Similar is going to be product that is similar. So if it's a 50-inch television and you're sending a 55-inch television, you could base it off of that pricing. Then we get down to the deductive and computive value. Now these become very cumbersome because there's algorithms that are put together to find out to find out what that value is and what has to be done in it. So there's a calculation, and that calculation is governed by U.S. Customs, and it's published in the Federal Registry what has to be used for the deductive value and the computed value and what has to be included in there. But it really starts off with that manufacturing price and then builds on top of what it costs to manufacture it. But again, remember, for U.S. Customs valuation, we're looking at the transaction value and then building everything back up to that transaction value so everything's level with that transaction value. And again, what we're seeing is If it's not sold, we're trying to bring it back up to that transaction value. And what we're seeing is a lot of people trying to use deductive value and putting on less than what needs to be put on there. And then they're getting in trouble because they're devaluing the product for U.S. Customs purposes. Switch to the next. I want to make sure this is working. There we go. So I don't know much about transfer pricing. I'm going to be honest with you because I'm a U.S. Customs broker. I'm not an accountant. So I'm going to gloss over this fairly quickly because you guys know more about transfer pricing than I do. So it's a comparable uncontrolled price method. This method uses market prices from similar unrelated transactions to determine a fair transfer price between related parties. You have the cost plus method, which this approach adds a standard markup to the production cost, ensuring pricing reflects both cost and reasonable profit margin. Resale price method. This method determines transfer price by subtracting an appropriate profit margin from the resale price to unrelated parties. Now, these are the OECD established international guidelines to ensure consistency and fairness in global transfer pricing practices. Now, when it comes to that transfer pricing, again, this is IRS, this isn't customs. U.S. Customs doesn't care what the IRS is doing, and IRS doesn't care what Customs is doing. They're two separate entities, and they're regulating two different things. So let me just look at what the next question is. Why don't we do the question number 2 before we move on?
Now, I want to just throw in, Damon, if I remember correctly from our event in October,
Yeah.
well, that poll question's up. You had, at the beginning, that difference between transfer pricing and customs valuation and the, two totally not overlapping Venn diagram circles or whatever. You had said that there's some pretty highfalutin law firms that had given that advice to some fairly, to a fair amount of clients, and you had to kind of step in. I can't remember if it was a client or just a company that reached out to you and kind of, show them why that was different. But so I don't know, have you come across that misconception a lot? I assume that's, part of why we're leading with that.
Yes. I actually, this is some large law firms, some large, accounting firms throughout the country are saying that you can use transfer pricing, that it is a valid method for customs purposes. Which again, it's not. It's got a certain reason for it. So what's the difference between these two? And like you said, I appreciate the interjecting a bit. It's the it's the two different agencies trying to accomplish two different things. When the first poll question was, what is the reason for what is the primary purpose of customs valuation? The answer to that is to determine the value of imported goods for customs duties and tariffs. That's it. That's all it is how much duty do you owe the government, and what is that tax? That's what they're trying to determine. They're not trying to determine tax liability for their IRS. They're not trying to anything with accounting. It's a whole separate entity. So yeah, that's what we're looking at as far as that goes. And the transfer pricing is strictly for taxes with the IRS. So the two really never overlap. They never meet. And again, if you use transfer pricing for customs, you could see where if you decide to use the cost plus method, this approach adds a standard markup to the production cost, ensuring price reflects both cost and reasonable profit margin. It sounds like it could be used for customs, but it really can't, because let's say you want to mark it up 10%. So you use your production cost plus 10%. It sounds like that could be good, but with customs, they could go in and say, look, you've sold this to 5 different companies in the United States and your price is X, why are you using Y, which is far less now moving forward? So they're going to go back customs is going to go back 5 years whenever they look at anything, um,
Okay.
to
Yeah,
see
5 years.
what the average is. Yeah, they go back 5 years and they look at all that information. Now, the other thing that customs does that a lot of people don't understand is when we process the entry as as customs brokers, we transmit all the values for the different line items, part numbers, and everything. And there's a tariff number that's associated with that. It's a 10-digit number. We go out of a harmonized book that's international, and every item number in that book has a certain range of value associated with it. And if we're outside that range, above it or below it, we end up getting an error when we transmit it to US Customs. And then they reject it. And then we have to prove to Customs why it is that price. So now sometimes we were getting the rejects that it was too low. And why was it? Because people were using transfer pricing instead of customs valuation. So now we're gonna kind of talk about the difference between the two, and we're gonna go over some information on why they're different and what needs to be done. So, purpose of customs valuation. We may have said this, but the customs valuation determines the value of the imported goods for customs purposes only. It's not related to income or taxation or anything like that. So we get calls every once in a while from states to give them the information on the imported product, because I don't know how state governments find this out, but they do somehow, that somebody's imported something and they're looking for their state tax and they're looking for the value of it. Well, I can't give it to them because I'm not allowed to. And
Okay.
secondly, it's not for taxation. It has nothing. Our values that we put on the product for customs are only for customs purposes. It's not for sales tax. It's not for income tax. It has nothing to do with the IRS. So the role of transfer pricing sets the prices for transactions between related companies to ensure they match market rates and fairness. Now, again, the interesting part about that is we're really trying to level out, like if there's related parties and you're undervaluing it for taxation purposes, it kind of sounds like it's the same thing. You're kind of doing the same thing with customs valuation, but they're two very, very different things. So different regulatory authorities, transfer pricing is regulated by the tax authorities, while customs valuation is overseen by customs and border protection only. So why don't we do?
Sorry, Damon. One
Yeah.
quick question. So these taxing authorities that'll call you, I assume it's because you're involved in the property that they're trying to get their hooks into. Okay.
Yeah. So the taxation department, New York State Revenue, will call me a lot and say, "Hey, you're listed on this as the importer, not the importer of record, but as the customs broker. Can you give us the value of this product because we need to charge state sales tax on this?"
Are you saying New York is aggressive with taxation? Are you saying that?
Off the record? Yeah, definitely. That's why I'm looking for a new home state. If you know anywhere better than New
Well,
York
if you want to
State.
leave the Bills and join the Browns crowd here in Cleveland, we're happy to have you.
I'm up for it. I don't follow the Bills, so we're good. So why don't we go ahead to number 3, and we could talk about that question too. So we move on to the third multiple choice question. Give everybody a couple seconds to look at that. I'm going to flip to the next slide here. So that would be we're just going to talk about some resources that I found out there that are really that are really helpful. Now, I don't know if you can send out a copy of this with these live links in it, Amit, but these are live links. So,
Sure, we can display them. Well, I'm sorry, we can send them out with the materials afterwards.
perfect.
I don't know, it'd be a little tough to do right now off the cuff,
Yeah,
but yeah, we'll
but
definitely send them when we send the materials to all the registrants.
perfect, perfect. So the top two links are with Customs and Border Protection. It's the Customs Valuation Encyclopedia. So this goes much deeper into the valuation of a product. And it'll talk about the assists. It'll talk about what needs to be included, blueprints, sales commissions, if there's a transaction value, why it is. I'll tell you another example of this. There's a company called Trek Leather, and they made men's suits. The guy who owned the company purchased the fabric in, I want to say, India, sent it to Pakistan to be manufactured into the suits, and then sent those suits into the United States. Well, the manufacturer wasn't charging for the fabric, so they missed the value of the fabric, undervalued it for customs purposes. The gentleman who owned the company was fined $2 million and also put in jail for 2 years.
Wow.
So the thing that you have to remember about customs regulations, and this was a really big court case in our industry, and it changed the way a lot of people see things in our industry. The person who actually signed the documents for U.S. Customs is liable for the validity or the truthfulness of those documents personally. So customs, the way the regulations are written, it's the person who signs the documents that's responsible. So they said that they didn't pierce the corporate veil and held the person who was signing the documents responsible. So a lot of these lawsuits that happen in the customs arena are happening personally to the individual that's signing the documents. So that person was responsible for the $200 million or the $2 million, and they were responsible for the 2 years in jail. So when we get into the customs realm of things, there's some heavy fines and penalties, no matter what the size of the company is. So the other links there, so those are both on Customs Valuation, and those are the top two, and they're both put out by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. They're great, great publications. I applaud them for what they did, and it's laid out in really good terms and explained properly. I used them all the time. I didn't have to rewrite anything. I was very ecstatic that the government did something right. And again, the two on the bottom are for transfer pricing. Those are both for from the Internal Revenue Service. And again, I applaud them. They did a very good job with frequently asked questions and how it's written. So that's that. I have a lot more time, but right now the slides are going into questions. But I want to talk about, you had mentioned earlier about the 232 duties and some stuff that's going on and getting some updates on what's going on there. So I'll kind of give you a good 15 minutes or so on that, if that's all right.
And I do have a question. Sorry, I have a question that came in through info. Okay. So this is, in your experience, has customs enforcement been greater during the second Trump term than the preceding Biden term?
No. Customs has always been customs, and I think they have kind of evenly distributed the fines and penalties every year. If you really look at what customs was set up for, Customs and Border Protection, you set me up for a great history lesson, which I love. Thanks, Amit.
Okay, wasn't me. It was a user that someone had asked, wanted to stay anonymous. So
okay, there we go. Well, that's perfect. So U.S. Customs, since their inception, really was about the enforcement of duties and taxes. They originally were under the Treasury Department. Their initial, it wasn't up until recently that they were segregated off and put into the Department of Homeland Security. Their function from 1778 up until 1915 was to collect revenue for the U.S. government. They were the sole source of revenue for our government up until 1915, which is when the IRS was invented, or the IRS actually started collecting taxes. I think IRS was actually established in 1913, but I don't think they collected tax until 1915. But if you think about that time period, that's a long time period for the government only to be funded by tariffs. So tariffs have been around since the beginning of time, and our government, our country has been at a trade deficit since its inception in 1776. So we've never seen a time where we've exported more than we've imported. So Customs and Border Protection was really established to protect the economy of the United States and manufacturing in the United States. And they have done a good job of evenly handing out fines and penalties right from the beginning. We have not seen an increase in enforcement or a decrease in enforcement. So yeah, it's been pretty even right through. And I see a question here. Which poll are we supposed to answer? The one that shows up on
yeah,
the
I'm
main
answering
screen?
it. I'm answering
Okay,
it, Damon. Sorry.
perfect,
This is a
perfect.
technical one. Yep. Sorry.
So yeah, I hope that answers your question. It's been pretty evenly handed out. I haven't seen an increase of enforcement during the Trump administration, or not. What I have seen is an increase in the amount of duties collected, but because of the IEPA duties. So let me give you a 15-minute overview of what's going on with duties and taxes on the customs side of things. So early last year, March of last year, we started the IEPA duties, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which I touched on a little bit earlier. So what that did is it added duty to different countries at different rates. Based on, I believe, our trade fairness or trade unfairness between those countries. China, obviously, we have the worst trade deficit in the world with China. One of our largest trade partners is Canada. Now, the media would suggest that we have put tariffs on everything that's coming into the United States, no matter where it's coming from. Ever since the beginning of the IEPA duty, so February, March of 2025, Canada and Mexico have been exempt from the IEPA duties under USMCA agreement. Now, USMCA is the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. Canada will call it CUSMA, and Mexico will call it the Mexican-US-Canadian Trade Agreement. There's no universal name for it like it used to be under NAFTA. So the IEPA duties have always been exempt if your product qualifies for that trade agreement. Now, it's not a deviation from what we had been before. So I would say roughly 85 to 90% of the products that are manufactured in Canada have maintained duty-free status in the United States. We're probably at about that same rate of Mexican products that are manufactured in Mexico coming into the United States are still coming in duty-free. General rates of duty will vary based on the product, but what we haven't seen is this flat rate plus the general rate of duty before. If you look at it, it's very similar to a VAT tax in Canada or any other country that has a VAT tax. I kind of wish that the administration had gone around it that way instead of going about it as a duty or a tax on the imported product. I think it would have been better accepted as a VAT tax. So if you look at the VAT taxes in different countries and kind of line it up with the IEPA duties, those are going to kind of match. So if you look at Brazil, the VAT tax, if you look at the IEPA duties that we're charging on Brazilian products, they're going to kind of line up. So, um, but it has created some issues for people that are manufacturing products in China and bringing them to the United States, because those go as high. Those were at one point as high as 140%. Plus the general rated duty. I think the problem with the IEPA duties is you have to remember that there's this general rated duty that could range from 0% up to 40%. And then again, that's on top of countervailing, anti-dumping, all of that stuff. So the duties there on IEPA are pretty interesting. What we have seen is, again, the transfer pricing. How do we avoid these duties or reduce the duties? And what I could say is what I've done in the past with companies is reinvent your supply chain. If you're paying 150% to have your product manufactured in China, find a different country in the world to manufacture your product and reduce that cost. I've done some consulting projects with companies that were looking to move their product out of China. We actually looked at every country available for their product. And even with the 150% duty on the product in China, it was still less than everywhere else in the world. So even though there was an additional 150% on it, they couldn't find it cheaper than anywhere else in the world. So there are some examples where this is really kind of cutting into the profits, but a lot of companies I've been able to help them readjust their supply chain, where they're buying product from, to lessen that duty impact, and actually it costs them less. So most of the time that's what we're able to find, but very few products you can even still buy cheaper from China. But that just goes to show how much China is devaluing those products and how much government involvement affects the pricing for products coming out of China. Amit, when you gave me the introduction, you said we were going to talk about 232 and give you some examples of what's going on, court cases and stuff like that. So
one question. Sorry, I have a question that came in on info, and they're just asking generally what you expect from the upcoming Supreme Court decision. So
that's perfect. So we have a layer of duties here. We have IEPA duties, reciprocal duties, 232 duties, Section 301 duties. These are all different types of duties that have been imposed under different regulations. So the IEPA duties are under I've said this so many times, but the International Economic Emergency or Emergency Economic Powers Act. There's 301 duties, which are what's called Section 301 duties, which are specifically on China. And those are under the Trade Act of, I believe, like 1960 or something like that. Then we have the 232 duties, which are Section 232 duties, which are tied to the security of the United States and the military and the military supplies of the United States. So 232 duties have been imposed on steel and aluminum products. And now, recently, in the last couple of months, they've been imposed on wood products. So anything that could be used to supply the military, they're saying that we have a disadvantage over these countries because they're supplying us with parts and stuff that could be used to manufacture military goods. So it was really initially imposed on primary forms of steel and aluminum, which made sense. President Reagan used that same 232 years ago for the same purpose. And I don't remember the media getting as hyped up as this go around. So these have historically always been used in the past. And I think what's happened is we haven't seen it as publicized as it is today. causing causing some of the miscommunications and misunderstandings of what's going on with these duties and taxes. So 232 is steel and aluminum, just been imposed on some different wood products. And then the 301 duties are imposed on specifically China to increase the value of those goods and try to make people um, not trade with that country. I've always been brought up to believe that communism is the enemy of a free market enterprise, and our type of government and democracy and free economics. And so if we're trying to battle against a communist country that's 90% of the manufacturing is subsidized by the government, how do you compete on that? We don't. So that's where these controls come in for duty and taxes. So there are actually court cases that are being heard on the 301 duties. Those have been going on since the first Trump administration. So they're working their way through very, very slowly through the courts. And every time I see that go through, it's going to be I would say probably later this year, the Supreme Court is going to decide on the 301 cases. But every court under them has already found in favor of the government on those. I don't expect the Supreme Court, to decide on that any differently than the lower courts. So that's on the 301 duties. Now, 232 duties have never been challenged. And I don't think they can be challenged just because of the way they've been authorized and done. Now, if you go to the IEEPA duties, this is the biggest question, and it's been accelerated to be heard by the Supreme Court, which they did hear it. Now we're waiting for their decision. And from the last briefing that I've read, it looks like they may decide tomorrow on the IEEPA duties. So we may hear something out of the Supreme Court as early as tomorrow. I would expect that it's probably going to be in the media by Saturday or Sunday, and you're probably looking at, my best guess, with the IEEPA duties. So that's why we talked about transfer pricing. That's all the duties that most people are worried about. I would have to say, and the lower courts have already decided in favor of the trade. There's information that I'm receiving on both sides that I really can't make an educated guess on what's going to happen.
I'm Damon, oh, sorry to interrupt you again, but
yeah,
a friend told me that online betting markets are giving a 30% chance that the court will uphold the tariffs. I don't know.
Wow.
That's what my friend told me.
Okay. So let me tell you what I'm seeing in the tea leaves, and then I'll give you all the information that I have and what's going on in the tea leaves with this court case so that you can make a decision for yourself. I can't decide either way. Early on, a lot of attorneys were saying that you should file with U.S. Customs to suspend the liquidation of your entries. Now, what that means is, if the liquidation happens, then the entry is closed as far as customs is concerned, and you can't petition the amount of duty that was paid on that product, just the rate of duty. You can't petition. So a lot of, I think, and again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but I think what is happening is attorneys saw a potential for making a lot of money, and customs brokers saw a potential for making a lot of money. Now, I advise all my clients, don't worry about it. If the court case goes in favor of the trade, you're going to get your money back because the court's deciding this case. It has nothing to do with you and the government. It's not between you and the government. It's between this. It's kind of like a class action lawsuit. You're not going to have to worry about it. Well, the Court of International Trade just came up with a decision that if the Supreme Court were to decide that the IEEPA duties were illegally imposed, that importers would not have to suspend the liquidation of their entries to get a refund. So that kind of gives me an insight to say, well, they're gearing up for a refund, maybe. The other thing that I'm seeing is that as of February 6th, if you're an importer of record, U.S. Customs will no longer issue checks for refunds. They have to receive a filing for a ACH refund method. So does this, those are two things that tell me that they're gearing up for massive refunds. I don't know. Could be not.
Huh. Okay.
Things on the other side of the aisle is the court really isn't deciding whether the IEEPA duties are legal or not. What the court has said that they're trying to make a decision on is, does the judicial branch have authority over the executive branch? And then the second thing that they're trying to decide is, under IEEPA, does the president have authority to impose taxes on foreign products? So we're looking at a couple things that, could slide you one way, could slide you the other. But what I'm seeing in the industry as this goes out with all these new taxes, some of the biggest issues that I'm seeing is it's happening so fast that customs brokers are having a problem keeping up with the changes. Some of these changes are announced at 6 p.m. and come into effect 12:01 a.m. the next day. So that gives us approximately 4 hours to adjust our computers, our software systems, inform our staff. We're pretty agile because we're a smaller boutique firm, but you could imagine someone that is a large firm that has thousands of employees, how to disseminate that information in 4 hours. It's just not happening. And also the validity of tariffs on products and the definitions. So we talked about the 232. I'm right now involved with a couple companies that are importing cast iron products, which actually aren't covered under the 232 duties. So they've paid out, one firm has paid out over $400,000 in duties, and we're in the process of recouping those duties for that customer because their product was cast iron, not steel or aluminum. So the devil's in the details with all of this stuff, and we're working on getting refunds on a lot of the duties because they're being imposed improperly. So you're really going to want to have your clients, if they're asking you about duties and taxes paid to customs, you're really going to want to get a second opinion on it. Have somebody do a deep dive into whether those duties actually were valid or not, because the customs brokers are making a lot of mistakes.
Both do a hell of a job searing the steak, I've found. Just you got to have the right fat and the right temperature.
Yeah,
that's my input on it. Aluminum versus cast iron.
Yep, exactly. So, all right, that's about all I got. I got a couple minutes here for questions. Anything regarding the importation of products, I could go off on any topic you want if there's something I haven't touched on. If I don't know the answer, I could get it for you and get it back to you.
Yeah, I think actually one thing, Damon, maybe on the president's, emergency powers. I mean, that's what IEPA is, and obviously, as you talked about, could you talk a little bit about the earlier, I'm sorry, could you just distinguish between the 301,
yeah. Okay.
the 301 and the 232, just real quick
let me go through
we'll get finished with a few minutes of that.
Yeah. Let me go through all the different duties that are out there. So we've become like this. It's been crazy. It's hard to keep up with. Trust me. So there's the general rate of duty on products, which is prescribed in the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States. It's column 1 in there, and it'll tell you the general rate of duty. Then there's a second rate of duty, which is to bad actors that are good trade partners with the United States. So those are the two duty rates that we've always had since inception of the harmonized tariff. Uh, so that duty has never changed, and that duty rate's going to range anywhere from 0 to 40%. Then there's anti-dumping and countervailing duties, which are decided by the International Trade Court under investigation of certain manufacturers or certain countries for subsidizing the manufacturing of products. We have a ton of anti-dumping countervailing cases on China. So those are case by case by the International Trade Court. And those could range anywhere from 20% up to 400% on certain products made in certain countries by certain manufacturers. Then we have the IEPA duties, which is the International Economic Emergencies Powers Act. So those duties are ranging anywhere from 15% up to 140% at certain times of the year. This past year, depending on China, because we've been negotiating with them. So it was at one point as high as 140%, down to, I think it's 30% now. Those IEPA duties are the ones that are being heard under the Supreme Court that may be decided tomorrow only. The 301 duties are the duties that are imposed on specifically China because they've been bad actors. And then the 232 duties are on steel and aluminum, and most recently wood products that are being imported from other countries. And that gets into a whole, because we've added on derivative products that we call them. So it may be a finally manufactured product that has steel on it.
And that debate is kind of as far as the IEPAs is the president's use of them that's kind of different than it has been used historically, and that's what the court's gonna weigh in on it, I guess, right?
So what they're weighing on is, they're weighing on whether the IEPA actually gives the executive branch the authority to impose duties. However, if you go back, and I actually visited the presidential library. If you've never visited a presidential library, I am please do. It was a education, and I actually visited the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library. It was an experience that both my children and I really had a great time, and I was actually able to read Jimmy Carter's use of IEPA. It was on display. Surprisingly, it was on display, and I was able to dig down into that and see why he used IEPA and how he used it. It is very broad authority under IEPA. If you actually go read the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, what it gives the president to do over foreign entities and foreign countries. And that is really, really broad. It was used previously to put people on sanctions. It was used to confiscate foreign entities' property, private property. So it's a pretty far-reaching piece of legislation.
Okay, I appreciate that. So we'll just finish up with a few. Thank you so much. We'll finish up with a few housekeeping things after you. If you could put that last poll question up there, Michael, that would be great. We got just a little bit of housekeeping and some to finish up with. So thanks so much, Damon. Really appreciate it. Hope to have you back for one of our CPE events, our in-person ones after April 15th. I know you enjoyed the world's best corned beef from Slyman, so hopefully we can convince you to make that couple hour trek down from Western New York again. The wings don't travel, otherwise I tell you to bring some Duffs or Acre Bar. But all registrants, you will receive the program materials, certificates by email on Friday, Monday at the latest, and based on your poll answering, not correctness, but just answering the poll questions, submitting them. The CPE certificates will be generated. We'll also have optional surveys there. We'll have the Damon slide deck and contact information in case you have any follow-up questions. I'm sure you'd invite those, Damon, if anyone has any
definitely.
questions. And thanks again to our sponsor, CCSI, and Joe Jasko again. As a user, I could certainly vouch that your firm or your firm's clients will want to check out their solutions if you're looking for simplicity and efficiency for IT needs. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you again for joining. Damon, can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And we'll just leave that last poll question up. And if anyone's got any final questions for Damon here during the last few minutes, we'll just be chatting idly till 1 o'clock. Please do feel free to submit them. Damon, that was great. Really appreciate it. That was I think good practical stuff. And we throw duties and tariffs. I think a lot of people just having a little bit of stratification between, hey, what's been around forever, what's been the the emergency powers, what's that issue with the president's use of them was some good history, and also some good practical stuff there as well, of course, with some of the changes and how rapidly they're coming out. And I guess I just, as a layperson in terms of customs, my thought would have just been that, hey, we might see more enforcement on terms of under administration that's very focusing on reshoring manufacturing and source materials and things like that. But I think a lot of times these government organizations, probably like the IRS, customs, they have kind of they're sort of entities unto themselves, as you said. And as we've found with the IRS, budgeting will certainly greatly, as we've seen with the IRS, any account will tell you impact certainly certainly will impact your chances maybe of having an enforcement action or random audit or whatever. So it sounds like it's kind of similar on the custom side.
I think I don't know. I thought I read somewhere once that customs was one of the only government agencies that had a positive revenue stream, which makes sense because the duties and taxes and fines and penalties. So
sure.
I would assume the IRS is the other one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, everyone's had ample time to get that last poll question in, and great. We look forward to talking with you soon, and appreciate your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and hopefully that was useful. We certainly do invite commentary, suggestions, whatnot through info@quantitax.com, or just pick up the phone and call Dave or I, and let us know your thoughts. So, Damon, good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.